Here we go, my last video before the actual season starts. And we're ending off with 10 ridiculously bold predictions. I definitely want to see what you guys have for bold predictions this year. Leave them in the comments and let's get into it. Number 1. Russell Wilson is benched for Jarrett Stidham at some point this year. Stidham was decent last year in his 2 starts. He took over for Derek Carr after he was done with Las Vegas. He put up 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and 89 passer rating. Of course, there's a couple reasons this could happen. Of course, Russ could be ineffective and the Broncos may not have a great record. And just a couple of days ago, there were those weird quotes about Russell Wilson said by Sean Payton. Apparently, Sean Payton said to Russell Wilson, "Will you effing stop kissing all the babies? You're not running for public office." Which A, is pretty hilarious because it's kind of true, but B, you never really hear a coach say that to a player. When Sean Payton got to Denver, they signed Stidham for 2 years, $10 million, which is definitely not cheap for a backup quarterback. And let's be honest, Sean Payton definitely has an ego, so if someone has to be blamed and the Broncos get off to a slow start, it could be Russ. And recently on the Bill Simmons podcast, Peter Schrager, who's pretty plugged in obviously, mentioned that Sean Payton did not take this job because Russell Wilson was there. Yeah, it's nice and maybe he bounces back to the guy he was in Seattle, but it's not like Sean Payton took this job because he was ecstatic working with Russell Wilson. Number 2, another quarterback one. Aiden O'Connell starts more games than Jimmy Garoppolo. This past offseason, Garoppolo was signed to a 3-year deal for over $72 million by the Raiders, which funny enough was Jarrett Stidham's old team. Garoppolo, who had been with Josh McDaniels previously in New England, is set to come over and run an offense that he's partially familiar with. And while Garoppolo's had his moments of highs and some lows as well, the guy has a lot of issues staying healthy. So whether he's benched due to poor performance or he just gets hurt, which is the most likely outcome, I can definitely see the rookie 4th round pick Aiden O'Connell starting more games this season. O'Connell's out of Purdue and he's definitely had some really good moments. He kind of suffers from the Jameis Winston syndrome, where on some plays he'll look phenomenal and make this play out of nowhere, but there's also some plays where he'll make a very bad decision. But in the preseason, he did look great, and ironically, he wears number 4, which was Derek Carr's number. So while I don't think Jimmy G gets benched for bad performance, it does seem likely based on his track record that he gets injured at some point, or maybe, just maybe, the Raiders have a bad season, they fire Josh McDaniels, and just want to see what they have in Aiden O'Connell at some point. Number 3, I briefly brought this up in my last video talking about the award predictions, and of course I picked Ja'Marr Chase to win Offensive Player of the Year. So my bold prediction is Ja'Marr Chase becomes the first 2,000-yard wide receiver. Of course, there's been plenty of 2,000-yard rushers by now, at least over a handful. Derrick Henry most recently did it, we saw Chris Johnson do it, Adrian Peterson, but still, no receiver has gotten 2,000 yards in a single season. And in this pass-heavy league, you would think it's going to happen at some point. In 2021, Cooper Kupp fell just short in the regular season. He did get it if you include the playoffs, but of course we don't count that. And in 2012, Calvin Johnson came very close as well. I've said it before, but Ja'Marr Chase was on pace for 190 targets last year. He has a special connection with Joe Burrow since college. It kind of reminds me of Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers in a way. He'll throw him the back shoulder balls, he'll throw him the 50-50s, and more times than not, Ja'Marr Chase comes down with them. As we sit here today, it seems like Joe Burrow is pretty healthy, and he should play in week 1. So if he's around all year and the Bengals are in competitive games, which they should be, it's a tough division, tough schedule, their run game is not that great, so if they have to air it out a lot, I could see Ja'Marr Chase getting 2,000 plus receiving yards. Number 4 for me, Kenny Pickett finishes top 5 in MVP voting. As I've said before, I'm in on the Steelers this year. I think Kenny Pickett has a breakout season. The floor for him and the Steelers just feels so high. They're always above 500. We saw Kenny Pickett in the second half of the year last year look much better. He has some nice weapons. The connection with George Pickens is great. Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, even Allen Robinson was added. You got 2 good running backs with Najee and Warren. And in the preseason, I don't think the ball even hit the ground for Kenny Pickett. He was pretty much flawless. And I get it, it's the preseason, whatever. He just seems locked in. Everything was on time, on target, and we know the NFL loves to hype up the new guys. People get voters fatigue, and people get fatigue in general when talking about the same quarterbacks for MVP over and over and over again, whether that was Brady in the past or now Patrick Mahomes. Kenny Pickett could be that new ascending star, kind of like Jalen Hurts was last year. He obviously won't be as good, but he could be close enough, and Kenny Pickett has some sneaky rushing upside. Maybe I'm a year early, I don't know, but I think Kenny Pickett's going to have a really nice year. Number 5, Nick Chubb has 18 or more total touchdowns. I hyped up Nick Chubb in my fantasy football video, so you guys know I like him a lot this year, but he's been so steady in every year of his career. By season, he's had 8 rushing touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns, 12 rushing touchdowns, 8 rushing touchdowns again, and another 12 rushing touchdowns. It could be time for that blow-up season. The Browns have a great line, maybe the best line they've had since Chubb's been there, with Wills, Bitonio, Teller, Conklin. They have a quarterback that should get better, and prime Deshaun Watson is a lot more feared than Baker Mayfield was, or Jacoby Brissett. He's obviously the clear-cut goal line back, there's no competition there, and the Browns have better weapons now, so they should move the ball more, and last year he had 13 total. He had 1 receiving touchdown as well. With Kareem Hunt gone, he should get more receptions and maybe even 2 receiving touchdowns, or maybe even 3, so that would be an insane league-winning and fantasy type year for Nick Chubb, but for how good he is, I think it's definitely possible. Number 6, the Seahawks and Cowboys win their divisions. Of course, I did not predict this to happen in my record prediction videos, but bold predictions are meant to be bold, and I could see this outcome happening. I'm high on both of these teams, and of course, they're supposed to be second in their divisions. The Niners are projected to win the West, and the Eagles are projected to win the East, and no one's really arguing that. Well, maybe except for Seahawks fans and Cowboys fans and Giants fans, but you get the point. Both of these teams made improvements in the right areas. Seattle drafted great the past couple years, getting Witherspoon and Smith-Njigba in the draft this year, and they get Jamal Adams back at some point early on this year. The Cowboys got themselves a first-round run stopper in Mozzie Smith, a really good wide receiver too in Brandon Cooks, and a really good cornerback too in Stephon Gilmore. So I don't know what the odds are that both of these teams win their division, but it's gotta be good money if that were to come true. Let's talk about the potential downfall for Philly or even San Francisco. The Niners have a Mr. Irrelevant pick starting at quarterback. They just traded their former 3rd overall pick, and as I've said, I'm not sold on Brock Purdy. I guess he can keep you afloat in a great system with great weapons, but as an individual, I am definitely not sold on Brock Purdy just yet, and more on that later, hint hint. But for the Eagles, I mean, I can't make a logical argument, but it's very rare for teams to have back-to-back really great seasons. It just seemed like everything broke right for Philly, the easy schedule, they were blowing teams out, didn't have to play in the 4th quarter many games, but it's not going to be as easy this year, and like, what if Jalen Hurts were to get injured? You just never know, and I do know that the Seahawks and Cowboys have the talent to win these divisions if the teams in front of them slip up. Number 7, Baker Mayfield is this year's Geno Smith. Like Geno, they wrote Baker off. He has a lot of similarities to Geno's situation last year. He was in a camp battle with a younger quarterback who was supposed to win the battle, but did not. And that, of course, was Drew Lock versus Geno Smith last year, and this year Kyle Trask against Baker Mayfield. Each guy has 2 really good top-end wide receivers. For Geno, that was Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, and for Baker, he has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And also a team with little to no expectations. Of course, Seattle's relevant now after the season they had, but think a year ago to what their expectations were. There were definitely people saying that Seattle may have the 1st overall pick at this time last year. Of course, chances are this won't happen, but the similarities are there, and I like Baker. I hope he does well, so we'll see if he can make the most of this potential last opportunity. Number 8, the Arizona Cardinals do not win more than 1 game. This has to be one of the more obvious tank jobs in a while. I haven't seen a more obvious tank job since the suck for luck Colts back in like 2011, which in fairness to them, they had an injured Peyton Manning, and I guess in fairness to the Cardinals, they have an injured Kyler Murray. But still, to trade away Isaiah Simmons for a 7th round pick, you trade away Josh Jones, who was really good offensive line depth, your head coach is admitting days before the season starts that last year's Super Bowl loss was on him. Just a lot of weird stuff going on there. The Cardinals schedule is tougher than I thought. I figured there'd be at least a couple of winnable games on there, and yeah, maybe there are, but still, I just think there's a lot stacked against them this year. I did say more than 1 game because I can see them winning 1 random game at some point. Hell, maybe even this Sunday versus the Washington Commanders. It's definitely possible. They can pull a 2020 Jaguars, win week 1 and never win again, and their defense may be historically bad. Like, without Budda Baker's leadership and him playing well, of course, I'd be very confident saying this is by far the worst defense in football, but one guy can only do so much. I like Kazir White. He played well with the Eagles last year, and of course Zaven Collins, the 2021 first rounder, has a lot of upside, but there's not much else to look look forward to on this defense. Their skill position guys are not terrible, but we don't even know who the quarterback is yet. We're assuming it's Josh Dobbs, maybe Clayton Tune, maybe Kyler Murray comes back at some point, but I don't think Kyler's going to play this year. If they're smart, which it does seem like their new GM Monty Ossenfort is smart based on the trade he made with the Texans, there's definitely a chance they can have 2 picks in the top 3, or maybe the first 2 picks of the entire draft. So if I'm the Cardinals, I'm kind of sitting this one out, to put it bluntly. So for me, seeing them win more than 1 game would be a bit of a surprise. Number 9, Aaron Donald is traded to the Steelers. The Rams are really bad, and I feel more confident saying that with the Cooper Kupp injury. I don't know how that offense moves the ball at this point. Cam Akers is good individually, but they have no offensive line to block for him. Matt Stafford's like 1 bad hit away from having his career over. And Sean McVay, he gave us the whole he found his love for coaching thing again, but I don't know. I don't really buy that. I feel like 1 more bad season and he may be out of there as well. So if you're Aaron Donald at this age, what's the point of sticking around on a very bad football team? He's been a Ram his whole career since 2014, back to the St. Louis days, so maybe he has the desire to stay with one organization for the entirety of his career, but if not for that, I don't really see a reason to stay there. He's still a stud and he's 32 years old now. The Steelers would make a lot of sense for him. Their defensive line is great, so why not make it even better? Pittsburgh once made that early season trade with the Dolphins for Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that cost him a first-round pick, and this would be a similar price tag. Donald's going to go down as one of the best defenders of all time, and if he's willing to play for another year or 2, I mean, it's probably worth making a move. That's one of those moves that can put you over the top for a potential Super Bowl. Donald, of course, went to Pittsburgh in college. He also grew up there, born and raised. I mean, it just makes too much sense. Now, as I alluded to, it does depend how much longer he wants to play. If Donald is dead set on retiring this year, maybe he just finishes off the season with the Rams. But if he wants to play for a couple more years, I mean, you might as well go to a competitive team. He can go back to his hometown. Pitt's facility is right next to the Steelers facility. As I said, it just makes way too much sense. Lastly, number 10, I hinted at this one before, Sam Darnold is the 49ers starting quarterback by the end of the season. Whether it's due to injury or Purdy underperforming, I don't know, but I feel like this one's very possible. What Purdy did last year was fun, it was cool, it was entertaining, it was a good story, but does it really have longevity, or did he strike lightning in a bottle? As I said, I'm not sold. I think it's tough to replicate for him. Teams have more tape on him now as well, and Kyle Shanahan seems to love Sam Darnold. Shanahan's not a moron. He knows that Darnold has more upside. He was better in college. He has more NFL experience, probably a better fit for this offense anyway. And I know Darnold seems older because he's been in the league since 2018, but don't forget, he just turned 26 over the summer. He's still younger than Joe Burrow, who was drafted 2 years after him. I know Darnold never found his footing consistently in New York with Adam Gase, and then in Carolina with Matt Rule, but can you really blame the guy? I know he hasn't been perfect, but he went 3rd overall. He's talented. He's definitely shown the flashes before, and I do think that by the end of this season, he will be the Niners starting quarterback. That is going to do it for this video, my 10 bold predictions for the 2023 season. I hope you all enjoyed. As I said, leave in the comments your bold predictions for this year. Definitely want to see those, and I will talk to you guys next time.